Content warning: child abuse. Due to the nature of Petscop, there are also many inferences I had to make. While I did the best I could to construct Rainer's life as shown here, using what resources I could, it may contradict commonly accepted theories. There was once a pair of brothers named Daniel and Michael. The two of them bonded over many things together, as brothers do, most notably of which was video games, as the two owned a PlayStation 1. For Mike's birthday, Daniel made him a video game. He called it Petscop, a puzzle adventure game about rescuing lost pets. Two of these pets were based on himself and his brother, a pair of birds named Roneth and Toneth. He even had their aunt, Anna, write a birthday card for Mike to put in the game. Even though only one level was complete, and Toneth hadn't been added yet, Mike loved the game. He loved it so much he played it 5 times. Although he did find the addition of an egg instead of Toneth quite cheeky. Daniel was happy that Mike loved the game. When Mike asked him to make it bigger, Daniel happily agreed. After all, he loved seeing his brother so happy. And so Daniel took up the name Rainer. He, Mike, their cousin Care, and a little over 20 of their friends from school began to work together on the game. Though most of them only did play testing, with Rainer doing the heavy lift, together they founded the Petscop Kids. The birthday card for Mike was then expanded out into a credits scene showing all of their names. This was called the Book of Baby Names, and each kid was given an adjective for what their name meant in the world of Petscop. Each name was given a meaning based on the person who played it. For example, Mike's name meant painter, based on all the art he drew of Petscop. Care meant dizzy for how she enjoyed simply running around in circles. And their friend Belle meant smart for how quickly and diligently she solved all the puzzles. As each of the kids played, Rainer recorded both their feedback and, using a debug feature he made, the inputs they used to solve the game. This is a very common practice in game development, as it helps programmers retrace the steps of their beta testers to discover why and how bugs end up happening. However, the Petscop kids weren't destined to last for very long. Soon into the project, a tragedy happened. Mike was caught in a car accident. Nobody's entirely sure what happened, only that it was a hit and run, and Daniel fell into a deep depression. If only I'd been spending time with Mike instead of working on this stupid game, he told himself. Petscop was, then, unceremoniously, tossed to the wayside as everyone mourned over the boy it was made for. This depression started to affect other aspects of his lives. The Petscop kids fell apart now that the project was done, and only Care and Belle having any presence in Daniel's life at this point. Even then, Care was left behind as Daniel slowly withdrew from the family. All until, one day, Daniel just up and left. He was an adult now. He left to live his own life. And what happened to him during this time is largely unknown. But somehow, his Uncle Marvin got into contact with him. Marvin knew Daniel was suffering, understood him more than any other member of the family. He also wondered how Daniel was able to hold down a job given his mental state. So, one day, he called Daniel and gave him an offer. Hey, you remember your old school? I got hired as a counselor there. Could you come in to be my assistant? At first, Daniel wanted to refuse. He didn't really want anything to do with anyone from back then, but he knew the isolation wouldn't help him. He agreed to work directly alongside his uncle at the school. He was still very young for his position, and he saw some of the people who used to be part of the Petscop kids. Belle and Kay both came in frequently. Daniel and Belle especially got close again. She talked with him about how she'd begun to question her identity and if she really belonged in the family. A question Daniel had been asking himself for some time now, though each for different reasons. Belle, due to her adoption, and Daniel with his separation from the family. Care also considered it, but only because she'd started being compared to an aunt that she'd never met. As Belle worked with Daniel and Marvin regarding the search for her identity, The head counselor suggested the use of a radical treatment that became popular at the time, rebirthing. Daniel was initially against it as he felt it was a bit drastic, but Marvin assured him it would solve Belle's issues. When Belle pushed back, Marvin asked her, "Do you remember being born?" The question stuck with her. Obviously she didn't. Who would? But her memories from before being adopted by the Let's Goets weren't pleasant. Only her days as one of the Petscop kids were particularly strong and pleasant memories. As the three discussed it over many sessions, ensuring Belle knew what she was doing, Daniel got excited. Having a close friend be a member of the family, the first one he could truly trust, made him overeager. He started calling her Tiara, name she had selected for herself. But no amount of time talking it over could have prepared Tiara or Daniel for how brutal the process would be. Not just in its standard practice, forcing restraints onto a child beyond what was safe or reasonable, all in the name of simulating the birth canal. But also, Marvin started asking Belle some strange questions. Normally, during rebirthing, the focus is put on music, and reminding the subject of who they were trying to become. But Marvin was hung up on her new last name, Leskowitz. He kept asking her about Lena, a name Daniel had heard growing up. His aunt's sister who went missing some time ago. The constant pestering over her freaked out both Belle and Daniel. Belle wanted to stop as she got scared and confused. Marvin kept shouting at her about being a quitter. Daniel, having had enough, it pushed Marvin off. The two got into a fight and Belle took this time to run away. It was a while before Daniel went back to work. He needed to take some time off. While away, he checked on Belle, made sure she was okay, and as they talked, she asked him why he stopped calling her Tiara. "I'm calling you Belle because that's who you are," he told her. His smile was warm, but she recoiled. All Daniel could do was apologize to her. "It's okay," she told him. "Kids can be too hurt for rebirthing, I guess." She put on a brave face, but Daniel could tell who she was talking about. He was quick to change the subject as well. Asked if Belle recognized the name Lena. That was the name of the woman who adopted her, though she didn't know if it was the same Lena. Neither did Daniel, as he never met the Lena that Marvin knew. When he came back to work, Daniel was on edge. He didn't feel like he could trust Marvin anymore. He still wanted the job. He loved working with kids, but knowing what Marvin was capable of made it impossible to react. It was also awkward being the counselor for his younger cousin. Care had been acting out, swearing, avoiding people, getting confused easily. He wasn't sure why, but it had him worried. Daniel found that board games helped a lot with the kids he talked to, gave them something to focus on. He always kept a few around like checkers, but Care seemed oddly attracted to one game he didn't like much, Grave Robber. He was thankful she already knew how it was played before ever coming into his office as well. Saved him the hassle of having to explain it, which he always felt bad at. The two would make small conversation as they played. Care wouldn't always come right away, but she'd always end up there. Her own little girl world, as she'd sometimes put it. They wouldn't always talk about her problems, but Daniel always made sure she felt safe to open up around him. Though he did sometimes chastise her, he tried to frame it as a teaching moment, or at least airing his own opinions on things. Kids shouldn't say swear words. You know why? It just doesn't sound right. It's disturbing, being one of those lessons. Then, one day, Care simply stopped showing up entirely. Nobody knows where she went. She just disappeared. Had Daniel not worked at the school, nobody would have found her. That day, by sheer accident, he was in the basement looking for Marvin when he heard pounding on the door. He recognized her voice, but when he opened the door, it was so dark he couldn't see her face. He pulled her out, helped her out of the school, and covered for her as she ran home. Distracted Marvin, who'd finally noticed something had happened. Two argued, and Marvin played dumb, pretending he didn't know anything. From that moment on, Daniel watched him like a hawk, investigated what he could, learned every inch of detail about this monster's life and what he could, vowed that nobody would ever be hurt by Marvin again. and he had the perfect tool to do it. Once again, he took up the name Rainer, a disguise he could use as he put everything together. His old game, his gift to his late brother, would now become his weapon to take down his uncle. He made a new area in Petscop, a hidden place that could only be accessed if they already knew how to get there. As he investigated Marvin, he added a room filled with his findings. Pointed accusations, all based on things Marvin would not be able to refute easily, especially if they ever found Care. Fortunately, she was still missing. She didn't run straight home as she was told. Daniel thought she would, but she didn't. And his attention slowly faded from creating this new part of Petscop to finding Care, the girl he was responsible for. Her going missing even caused Marvin to get kicked out of his own house, leaving Daniel to pick up the pieces and help his aunt any way he could. It was during this time that Lena, Belle's adoptive mother, formerly came into his life. She greatly helped with his investigation, to the point where Rainer started calling her boss. Whatever grudge she had with Marvin matched his own, only her way was more subtle. She allowed him to be the wrecking ball so that she could construct a proper expose out of the destruction. Together, they turned Rainer's scattered notes and accusations into what they called the caskets, visual representations of Marvin's sins. And so the newest copy of Petscop, labeled the Roadmap, was placed anonymously in Marvin's mail at the school, with instructions on how to access the new area. Daniel then, for the second time, completely disappeared. This time, nobody could get a hold of him. Nobody knew where he went. Nobody wanted to. After all, he's the one who left Care alone and scared to wander the streets. During this time, Rainer began working on his final project. After stealing Marvin's copy of Petscop from the school, once he was sure Marvin had played it, he compiled the inputs he gathered across the years from everyone who'd touched the game. Mike's many runs, the testing from the Petscop kids, Marvin's exploration of the roadmap, and a final playthrough from Belle in this new underground. He was determined to turn all of them into one of the most advanced AI in the world at the time. Something that should not be possible, given the technology he had access to. And yet, Rainer learned how powerful a life built off of spite and hatred can be. How far a man can go to destroy someone after they'd hit rock bottom. But this did nothing to hide his self-hatred. It would slip in every now and then. 3 lines of flavor text in the game found their way in because of it. Lines that he knew weren't supposed to be there, but couldn't bring himself to delete. Because they were a perfect reflection of how he felt, deep down. And his hate for Marvin couldn't distract him from his guilt for Mike, and even more strongly, Care. They won't even give me a picture of her now. They're all scattered in graves, and I'm a piece of shit. Here I go. With his AI, he started from a basic generative model. He'd given them a goal, leaving the house, watched them run around, and made it so whoever got closest to the door and then left the house fastest would survive and seed the next generation. It was a slow development, one he felt dragged on longer than it really did. But it was the base foundation for everything. Once he had the AI that could reliably move around on its own, he got to work converting them into 3 distinct programs. The first one he made was Care. He plugged in where the school and house were in relation to each other, told it the basics of who Care was and what she was doing, and then tried to use it to see where Care might have ended up. But to no avail. Wherever it went, he'd check, and she wasn't there. Care ended up back home before he could use Care's AI to find her. And so Care's AI was scrapped and turned into a set of pets to collect, based on what Belle had told him about the state Care was in when she was finally found. The next was an AI based on Marvin. Its sole purpose was to be a perfect recreation of him. This was the one that Rainer obsessed over the most. Tried to get every little detail right as best he could with a PS1 game. Eventually, Marvin's AI began to exhibit behaviors that were not programmed into it, slowly turned into the real Marvin. Raynor was happy with his creation, but also sickened by it. Disgusted that he felt the need to recreate that monster. But seeing his AIs could become intelligent like this gave Raynor an idea. He pulled Belle aside and asked her if she was okay being the basis for one of his AI. She hesitated. Belle didn't want what happened to her to be broadcast to the world. Raynor assured her that only the family would see it. While she was still hesitant, Belle agreed that they needed to know. That if she wanted her family, she needed that family to know everything. And so Raynor got to work on creating Belle's AI, the most intelligent of the bunch. He taught it how to be Belle and gave it a unique function, draw mode, the ability to alter the game's textures as she saw fit, to deliver any messages the player may need to know, act as a guide so the player was always able to see what Raynor wanted to show them. However, during testing, something horrific happened. Marvin found Belle. Just as he did in real life, he hurt her, tortured her, forced her to rebirth. Raynor pulled the plug to stop it. After leaving the game alone to cool off, he turned it back on and came to two horrific realizations. Firstly, turning off the PS1 resets his AI back to a primitive state. While they eventually redeveloped back to the intelligence he wanted, this meant that if the game was turned off too soon, the player would lose their guide and villain. Secondly, Belle no longer responded to that name. Raynor was too late, and Marvin had successfully turned her into Tiara. And now she worked for him, collecting pieces he'd scattered across the game to rebirth Care. Raynor didn't want rebirthing to be possible in the game. He included less than the 1,000 pieces required to rebirth on purpose. The whole idea was to frustrate the Marvin AI into revealing everything about itself. But he circumvented that by using the other AI's ability to collect pieces without inhibiting the player's ability to collect them. But seeing this, Raynor realized that the demo mode could be used to reveal things as well. Some spaghetti code he'd put in allowed some data from the demo mode to carry over onto the current save file and vice versa. He noted this down and wanted to find ways to utilize that for experimenting later. Still, the game was missing something. All the evidence was there, but it lacked the fundamental glue to keep it all together. Towards the end of development, a news article came out. A tragic accident while someone was being rebirthed. Candace Newmaker. Awful memories of Belle flashed into Raynor's mind, but he saw this as an opportunity. This was the highest profile news article about rebirthing he'd ever seen. This led to him putting his finishing touch on the game, Newmaker. The title given to the world underneath Petscop's gift plane, and the title he'd given both himself and Marvin. They were the Newmakers. The monsters who almost killed Care and tried to kill Belle. With everything finished, he got back into contact with the family. It'd been 3 years by now. Whatever anger and animosity they had towards him had dissolved upon realizing that not only was he alive, but he was planning to visit them for Christmas. That he had a big surprise for them. Something the entire family would want to see. They were excited, but worried about what would happen if Marvin showed up. What would happen if he and Daniel were in a room together. After assuring them that everything would be fine, Raynor packed up his things and made his way back home. Back to the family he was once so close to. The family that, at one point in his life, were the most important people to him. And back to finish what he started with that coward of an uncle he had. Raynor was good at hiding his intentions. He learned how to do it when he worked at the school. He wanted to make sure nobody suspected a thing about him. He wasn't used to being called Daniel anymore. He drank more than he should, and sometimes he thought he wasn't drinking enough to follow through with his plans. But it was a good night. A night that he was happy to end everything on. He just wanted to see everyone happy one more time before they all learned the truth. Had he not dedicated his life to hatred, he would not have the strength to ruin it for them now, but he knew it had to be done. Once it was time to open presents, he went last. "It's for everyone," he told them. It made him sad to see anyone had gotten him presents, while he only had the one. The family thought his tears were of happiness, when really they were the dam finally starting to break. It was his turn. He set up his PlayStation, having modified it a bit to help with running Petscop, and turned on the game. The room was flooded with nostalgia, seeing his silly little game brought back again. "Michael loved this," someone said, not knowing they twisted the dagger in Raynor's hardened heart. Once it had gotten to the point where he knew that they would be able to figure things out on their own, or at least with Tiara's help, he told them he'd be right back and went to the bathroom. Something nobody mentioned, but a few people noticed, was how the pause screen started saying, "Keep playing, I'll be right out." Slowly, the mood of the room darkened. They had realized what this was. Anna wanted to turn it off, but Jill was adamant that they needed to see it through. When they got to the part where Care was kidnapped, it was almost too much for anyone to bear. But Jill took the reins and did what needed to be done, just as she always had. Once she had taken care for herself, she read Raynor's final message to them. "When the emergency began, you were all looking for Care A. I told you all we would never find Care A. When Care A goes missing, she's gone forever. My brother didn't want us to find him because he knew we were all looking for Michael A. I'm back. This is my present for you. I started it in 1996 for Marvin. If you think they're worth any effort, see if you can save Care B or Care NLM. Care B is in the school, of course. Fuck you all, and fuck me as well. Merry Christmas. Check your bathroom now." The family hesitated, but someone went to check. Everyone heard a scream and saw a pool of blood. With his mission complete, Raynor had nothing left to live for. Daniel died a long time ago, and Raynor was ready to join him.